Okay, folks, let's go ahead and get started here. Super glad that you're joining us. There will be people that continue to jump on just in the time that they have. Everyone's busy and we've got a lot going on, but I'm just real thankful that everyone's here and to kind of take part in the conversation that I think is super important for us who are in the tech industry. And whether we're in leadership roles or not, I mean, this idea of self-sabotage is something that is very real for the majority of us, and so we'll kind of unpack what that means and what that looks like, and we'll have a chance to hear from somebody who's in the trenches to get a better idea of what that experience is like. But really want to not only just kind of provide a place for us to identify with each other around this idea of sabotage, but also I really want you to take away some very specific things that you can implement in your various places of work and whatever role you're in, to just kind of give us a better idea of the things that are getting in the way of us not only doing good work, but just getting work done to begin with. And so again, really glad that you've joined us. For those of you that are new to the TopLeft webinars that we're offering, my name is Stephen. I'm the VP People for TopLeft, and I just get the privilege of working with a lot of incredible people who are doing some amazing things around not just building the TopLeft tool, but really trying to make people who work in the tech industry just do better work in a more efficient way. And so the webinars that I typically host are typically once a month, and they're more around the softer skills. And so we've talked in previous webinars that I've hosted around how to run, plan, and lead really good meetings. We've talked about things like more like emotional intelligence and things like that. And so just again, really glad you're here. So I want to just kind of set up the schedule for today, what we're going to talk about, and just to give you an idea of what to expect. And so I started last time, if you were on the webinar last time, I introduced this idea of the Lean IT House as a framework that we're using to really just kind of build the company and build the ecosystem of tech that we work in. So I'll revisit that for a couple of seconds and then talk how today's topic is going to address that model. And then I've invited one of our team members who works at our company to just give a little bit of his background and story around what self-sabotage means to him, just as a better way to get us on the same page and thinking about this idea together. So that'll be the second thing. And then the third thing that we'll do is I'll just lay out 6 ways to get out of your own way. That's kind of funny language. And the assumption is that it's us that get in the way of doing good work. And so obviously there's a lot of factors that keep us from moving work ahead and completing our work. But I'll give you 6 things to think about when it comes to our own perspective and how we approach that. And then I want to introduce at the very end, before we sign off, an event that we're hosting in July that I think you might find really valuable. So, and then at the end, that's the end. So those 4 things, if we can accomplish those things today, I think we'll be in a really good spot. And so let's talk first of all about, actually, no, before I talk about the Lean IT House, I just want to do a little bit of a tech test, if you will, but also I just want to get an idea of who's on the call. So if you could just throw into the chat just kind of where you're from and what role you play in the company that you work for. So those 2 things, where you're calling in from and what your role is, because that's just, it's fun for me to know who's on the call, but also it'll just give me an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of who's on the call. So take a minute right now and please throw that stuff in the chat, okay? And yeah, here we go. Yeah, nice. Yeah, we have Daniel, we have Jim from our team here. Come on, folks. I know there's more than just those guys. Yeah, beautiful Vancouver Island. Jim, what's the weather like there? We're supposed to get like one of those rivers coming in.
Palm Springs, very hot.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, keep it coming. Where are you from and what do you do? Yeah, nice. We have oh, I know, lots of rain. Doggone it. All right, thanks for doing that, everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and keep going here. So the idea of the Lean IT house, this is the graphic here. I am not going to talk through each one of these little kind of mini graphics within the larger picture. But the reason that I like to share this is because we're going to be rolling this out in more detail as we go along, whether it's through webinars like we're doing now, or through different newsletters or blogs that we put out, because this really kind of forms the backbone and the framework for why we do what we do. And so you can see the kind of the two pillars that make up not the foundation, but on top of the foundation. On the left side, it's more about what the TopLeft tool is designed to do, which is improve our workflow and performance and things like that. But the webinars that I do and that you join me on are typically focused on the right side. And so the idea is that there's two things going on as we're trying to do our work. There's the tech stuff, there's the systems and the processes, but we can't forget that there's that other side, which is the people side, the leadership side, and the mindset side. And so the idea of the Lean IT house is building a foundation, and on top of that, you have two things happening, and one cannot exist without the other. We can't be focused solely on systems and processes without being focused on people and mindset, and we can't only focus on people and mindset. So the two things definitely have to work together. So the last webinar, if you were joining me for that one on running effective meetings, I indicated that was the part of the Lean IT house that was focused on was respecting people at the very bottom right. And so the webinar today, the topic of self-sabotage, we're focusing on modeling ideal behaviors. And hopefully what you'll get is that if we are able to address some of the things in our own lives personally that hold us back from doing really good work and completing really good work, if we can figure some of that stuff out for ourselves, we'll be able to model that in our leadership with the people that work with and for us and around us. And so that's why I think this fits really well in that category of modeling ideal behaviors. So what I want to do now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a second here, but I want to introduce you to one of our team members. Daniel Hoeving is our assistant VP for service delivery. And Daniel, I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief intro. If you want to fill in any gaps that I've missed, just so people can know who you are, I'll give you that leeway to do that. But Daniel's been with the company for, I want to say 7 years, Daniel. And so, yep. Yeah, he's seen a lot just in terms of the growth of the company. He's held a number of different roles over those 7 years. And he's just got a unique perspective in terms of this idea of getting in our own way when it comes to moving work forward. And so, Daniel, fire away. He's going to share his story for about maybe 10 to 12 minutes, and then I'll come back. But I really appreciate you giving us your time, Daniel. Look forward to hearing what you have to say. Let me just stop sharing for a minute here so we can just stare at your face there and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Awesome. The last face I want to stare at is my own. Well, first, let me say that I don't particularly agree with the term self-sabotage. So sabotage indicates an intent to harm. A great deal of what we think of as self-sabotage comes from ingrained patterns that are taught over a lifetime. Essentially, they're survival instincts, things that happened to you as a child that you learn to avoid, right? Anxiety, pain, things like that. So a little bit of background about myself. I didn't intend to end up in IT. I started my education with the intent to become an anthropologist. I wanted to study cultures, preferably old dead ones. But due to constant pressure from my father to get a job and a lot of personal struggles during college, I ended up failing most of my first year. I literally sat down to write my anthropology exam and blanked out. I couldn't remember anything from the course. I didn't even remember who Mary Leakey was. And, you know, if anyone says Lucy after that, they remembered more than I did during that test. So I went back the following year and went into something that I was already well versed in and that could get me a job, AKA IT. I was raised in a single parent home. My parents were divorced before I was out of diapers. My father had custody and he was an authoritarian. And more importantly, he was very arbitrary. You know, most authoritarians live by a strict set of rules. His rules were do as I say, not as I do. This led me to learning quite young to step quietly and to never be certain of anything. Something that was fine for me to do one day would get me yelled at the next or worse. This led to very specific coping mechanisms for me. I learned to say yes whenever anything was asked of me because you didn't dare say no. I let others talk over top of me because my opinion didn't matter. And I lacked any confidence in my abilities. And most importantly, I was looking for a way out constantly. This led, of course, to a lifetime struggle with mental illness. But more importantly for this conversation, it led to my primary forms of self-sabotage, procrastination, people-pleasing, and at my worst, aggressive self-destructive behavior. And since this is an IT-centric webinar, we're going to talk about these things in the context of IT. Procrastination is a no-brainer. It's anxiety avoidance. For most technicians, it's a matter of avoiding the next step of a ticket that particularly involves something daunting, like picking up a phone and calling people. It is incredibly scary to talk to people or incredibly scary to do the unknown, and so we avoid it. There's a whole bunch of tickets in my bin that are easier to work on, so that's what I'm going to do. This is no different for me than any of the techs on my team. I really don't want to pick up a phone and call someone. That's what email's for. But in all honesty, most people don't answer ticket updates. They don't answer emails. And so we're like, oh, we tried, and we go on and we avoid that anxiety. For myself, as a way of dealing with this, I don't send ticket updates anymore. I send direct emails underneath my or above my signature so that they know who I am and it looks like a real email. And then as step two, I make that phone call. For me, that involves rehearsing the phone call before I get on it, which means I talk to myself a lot. Yeah. But I'll have to admit that when I make that call, I have a sigh of relief if I get an answering machine. For my team, because I know this is true of myself and I've seen it in them, we have a 3-step process to avoid this sort of thing. 1, they send an email out of band, outside of the ticket. 2, they make a phone call. Whether it's answered or not, they've made the phone call. And 3, if they still haven't gotten a hold of the client, we escalate it to our service coordinator, who's a much more outgoing, friendly person than any of my techs. Sorry, guys, it's true. So people pleasing, it's a combination of anxiety avoidance, poor boundaries, and a desire to be accepted. We all want to be liked, right? We all want people to be happy with you, us. The people pleaser is your tech who's always answering the phone, always agreeing to do one extra thing, even working on people's personal equipment rather than sticking to the confines of what their job is. Typically, he's the guy who's got so many balls in the air at one time that one of them's destined to drop. And this is where people pleasing becomes a problem. Right? You can't please everyone. We end up with issues of, double booking ourselves, agreeing to do things that are way outside the scope of our job, and otherwise just being everybody's gopher. I can't count the number of times when I've told a client, oh yeah, no, that's on my way home. I'll just stop by, after hours and give you a hand with it. And knowing full well that the client's in the opposite direction that I have to travel. Or when someone says, oh, I'm only available Saturday. Oh, no problem. 9 a.m. Sure, I'm up. And that sort of thing. I see it in the team in a various number of ways. In particular, those people who are always kind of bending over backwards to give people advice or help them with stuff that we don't get paid for. And in all honesty, MSP, if you're not getting paid for it, you shouldn't be doing it. For me, the solutions for this are putting some boundaries in place. Now, my boundaries are still really, really crappy, but I'm working on it. I never agree to anything that puts my family second. So they're a safety net. And if someone asks me to do something outside of regular hours, or that is, outside the scope of my job, I say, let me check my schedule and get back to you. It's a way of taking control of the situation, and I can get out of more outrageous requests by saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm booked during that time. So these two are pretty basic and something I see a lot of in techs. The more dangerous one from my point of view of self-destructive behavior, or self-sabotage, is the aggressive self-destructive behavior. I apologize, I'm not a public speaker, so please don't mock me for tripping over my own words. First, let me say this is an outlier. Most people, if you get this far, something's failed. I'm not going to suggest that this is common, although I have seen it in some people, but myself in particular, I see it in. And this looks different in everyone. This could be drug and alcohol abuse. This could be a superiority complex, belittling coworkers because they don't know things, or just being an a-hole, right? Steve asked me not to use swear words, so I shrunk it. Typically, this behavior can lead to an RGE, resume generating event. So let's illustrate with a real world example. I'll use myself as a guinea pig here. A while back, we had just agreed to take on a client from another MSP. I'm not going to specify who, client or MSP. Sales, again, not specifying individuals, had agreed to do the onboarding with a minimal review of the client's environment. Yeah, because that never happens, right? And zero review of the client's workflows or any custom requirements. The scope was a little bit ambivalent, and the time budget assumed a simple rip and replace. So I can't avoid responsibility for this. They showed me the project, and I went, yeah, that's doable. But I knew the budget was tight, but I was sure we could do it. People pleasing, right? Someone said, "Can we do this?" And I said, "Yes." Right out of the gate, there were issues. I had a call with their previous MSP, and the primary tech on their account laughed when I said we were taking over and wished me well. This should have been a warning sign right off the bat. At that point, I should have turned around and talked to someone about it. But okay, take it with a grain of salt. I've had clients that I would have happily handed over to someone else too. The client was on small business server, and we were migrating their Exchange to Microsoft 365. We were splitting out their server into a proper domain controller and file server on a new hypervisor, and we were retiring the old server. Straightforward, right? We were told by the client that they weren't using SharePoint. And of course, this turned out to be false. They were using SharePoint calendars for their booking. So we had to deal with that. There were a bunch of networking issues. That network was just hobbled together. Some machines were well beyond the 100-meter point on Ethernet. It just goes on from there. Finally, there was a piece of custom software that was written in-house, and it was their baby. They ran their entire business off of it. Anyway, to avoid giving myself flashbacks, the scope kept increasing, but the time budget didn't. Problems kept cropping up, problems with the design, problems with the client, problems with everything. And I started getting more and more stressed. I started internalizing that stress rather than saying, hey, I need help with this, which is pretty typical for me. And I started to get more surly. I started getting short with people and generally just obstinate. Somebody took me aside and said that, hey, what's going on? The rest of the team is walking around you on eggshells, kind of in the same fashion that I used to walk around my father. This was a sign, right? This was a problem. Aggressive self-destructive behavior is a mental health issue. If you're seeing it in your texts, something went wrong a long time ago. With my team, we meet on a regular basis so I can know what's going on in their life outside of what's going on in their tickets. I ask them about non-work related stuff when I'm in a meeting. It's totally voluntary, but I check on how their weekend's going, what's going on, how they're feeling with their workload, how they're feeling with their personal life. I make sure that I know how they're doing so that I can make sure that they're at their best when they're at work. Because I know if somebody had checked on me a lot in my career, I might not have done some of the things I did. Keeping a pulse on that workload and keeping regular check-ins is crucial to keeping out of this area of self-sabotage. So the story above is not completely unique in my career. I've done that sort of thing a number of times, and thankfully that wasn't the end of my journey. Working for KTI, they've had a lot of grace with me and helped me along the way with situations like this. On my own, things like getting counseling, medication, negative visualization, and probably most importantly, an accountability partner is really been helpful with my self-sabotage and with my self-destructive behaviors. My accountability partner is my wife, Andrea. She tracks my moods and makes sure that she keeps me alert to any self-negative talk or doom speaking, as it's referred to in my house. There's a rule in my home. I'm not allowed to make major decisions between October and March. As the days get shorter and the weather gets worse, so does my mood. If I'm talking about quitting, or if I'm talking about mass murder, that's usually when it happens. And my wife is just like, time for you to take a break, time for you to sit down and just chill. So that's my situation with self-sabotage. I have been working quite a bit on it over the last couple of years. It's one of those things that as an individual, we tend to be aware of, but can't change. It takes outside assistance to help you make those changes. But as any good 12-step program will tell you, the first step is admitting that there's a problem. And if you see it in yourself, take the steps. And if you see it in your team, be the person that comes alongside and helps them. Thanks.
Yeah, Daniel, really, really amazing stuff. And while I transition back to the slideshow, the presentation, I really appreciate your willingness to share a little bit of your story. And it's individual. What you heard, everyone, is individual and unique to Daniel, and it might not be a reflection of everyone else's story.
No.
But I'm really interested to know, can we relate to a part of, or maybe all of what you've heard from Daniel? Like I said, it's individual and unique to him, but maybe just throw a yes in the chat, maybe just to indicate that, yeah, this is part of my story. And even just to support Daniel, just for the risk that he took and the bravery to share a little bit of his story. So can we relate? I know I can. But I'd love to know if we can resonate with something that you heard. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thanks, Tony. I'm sure everyone can. Now, I want to just, before I continue on with the rest of the presentation, we're going to get into the 6 things in a minute based on what you heard. But I want to just say that if you're on this call and you're in a position of leadership, and I'm talking about like you have a formal role to play, leading something in the company that you work for, there's certainly some use for what we're going to talk about and what you've heard from Daniel. But even if you aren't, if you're here and you are an engineer or a technician and you have responsibility for client-facing work, but maybe not a lot of leadership, this stuff is for you too, because it's something that is a part of all of our stories, regardless of where we're from or what role we play. So I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page when it comes to the content that I'm about to share. And so let's get into the 6 ways to get out of your own way. And that language, I'm using that on purpose because the assumption is that a lot of us, like Daniel has articulated, a lot of us will start from a place of there's something going on in our own lives that prevents us from moving forward. A lot of the times we try to look for external reasons why things aren't going well. Like we blame others, we blame the economy, we blame a client. You know, there are always excuses that we can come up with, but I'm challenging us to, before we go there, to look inward and try to come up with reasons why it's so hard for us to get out of our own way. So the first thing that I'm suggesting that we all do for ourselves and also for others, we've got to get better at asking for help. You might be saying in response to what I just said, well, you know what I do, but I eventually get around to it. But one of the things I know is true about each one of us in this room, and I think it's safe to say this, is we're conditioned, we're wired, we're trained to solve problems. And so that's we get a dopamine hit from it. And so what better way to get that high than to find problems to solve? And if we can just keep digging and going deeper and eventually we'll solve it, we get a lot of worth from that. But the mistake that we sometimes make is we wait too long to ask for help. And so we sometimes struggle asking for help because there's fear. And there's 4 fears that I think are in place that keep us from asking for help. There's the people related fear, the one that is we're afraid of what people will think or how they'll react. So it prevents us from asking for help. We're also used to working independently. We would much rather just kind of be in our own bubble and just have the work laid out for us and then just let me just chew through it at my own pace. The idea of fear of losing control is something that is very real. And it doesn't matter if it's in tech or in our home life or in our hobbies away from work. We do like that feeling of control. And so asking for help is almost an admission that we're willing to give that up. And that's very, very difficult. We don't want to come across to people when we ask for help as being needy, because that could be a sign of weakness. And so why ask for help? Because we want to come across to our peers and those around us, our family members, as being strong and capable. And the last fear that we all experience is that we fear being rejected. So we'd rather not take the risk. We're out to earn a paycheck. We're out to prove worth and value every day. And so we don't want to be rejected. And so we don't ask. So those are, I think those are pretty standard across the board. There might be some nuances from story to story, individual to individual, but those are the 4 fears that are typically present in our lives. And so I want to offer a couple of solutions. And Daniel mentioned this in his brief talk, the importance of accountability. If you have people in your life that know who you are, that you're able to share your story, that they can then understand you and you can understand them, you're going to be able to go to them in a safe way and say, hey, you know what, I'm struggling with this and I need some help. And you know that that person in your life is not going to look back at you and go, oh, you're needy, or, oh no, I reject you because you're weak. They're not going to be that person in your life. And so find that person that you can trust and that trusts you, that you can go to in a safe way to ask for help. Make sure that, again, whether you're in leadership or not, that you have conversations around problem solving as opposed to just taking a more transactional approach. And here's what I mean. A transactional approach is more like, oh, this is a problem. I need you to help me solve it. Or why is this going wrong? What do we need to do to fix it? So it's identifying a problem, and then the transaction is I need someone to help to solve that problem, or you assign someone to solve that problem. So that's typically what we do because, well, we have people that are in positions to help us get things done. And so that's how we ask people to get things done. But a conversational approach is better because all of a sudden it means that you're asking just really good questions of someone, and you're having a conversation that invites them into the process of problem solving. So a conversational approach might look something like this. It says, hey, this happened with a client. They're not happy. What do you think we should do? Any ideas? You might have a really good idea, but you want to create an atmosphere, an environment of openness to invite people into the process of solving a problem in a non-threatening way. So think about the difference between transaction and conversation in your own life. And then really understand what your own capabilities are and what can you delegate away. Because if you're a little bit like me, I struggle mightily with delegation. I really have, because I am a bit of a control freak. And so it's not like I don't recognize the value of people around me. It's just, it's really hard for me at times to want to let something go because I usually feel confident that I'm going to be able to get it done quicker. And because I know what I want, why would I try to farm that out and take the time to explain it to somebody? Maybe you can all relate to that, but I have to get better at not just like seeing the value of people around me like I do, but inviting them into the process of solving that problem together. It's not like people need to do things for me, but I need people around me to do things with me so that we can get to a solution to a problem. So that's the first one, asking for help. Oh, and then, sorry, the fourth thing here as a solution, establish a team of helpers. And so you might have one person in your life that you can be accountable to, but if you have a team of people around you that have that same approach to problem solving, and you get people who are not afraid to ask for help, then all of a sudden you have these amazing conversations going on your team, and you're going to be able to solve problems a lot quicker and in a lot more enjoyable way. The second thing, learn to operate in the gray. Here's what I mean by that. The environment is always uncertain. No matter how hard we try, we cannot control what happens in the environment. And when I say the environment, I mean the work environment. So with our clients, in the different infrastructures that we're managing and trying to maintain. We try our hardest to put together systems and processes and documentation, SOPs, but for some reason, the environment still is unpredictable and uncertain. And so we just need to learn to thrive in that and accept the fact that that's just the case. Life and work can't always be a 1 and a 0, this or that, right or wrong, black or white. It just doesn't work that way, no matter how hard we try. And then we have to understand what it is that we can control. Depending on the size of your team, if you're in the position to lead a team, you cannot control everything that happens on any given day in any given circumstance. We have dashboards, we have metrics that give us information about how to make decisions better and where to make changes in our work routines and how we serve clients. But there are things that we can't control. Like we can't control how someone is feeling on a given day. We can't control the mood that a client is in, or an emergency that happens on the client end that affects what we can do. And so understand what you can control, and just learn to be very gracious and kind and invite people into a conversation so that you can address those uncontrollable things together. So what are some very specific solutions when we talk about this second point of learning to operate in the gray? Folks, we've got to get more comfortable with the fact that uncomfortable is normal. We keep trying to achieve this utopia.
Yes, hi, good morning. I'm a patient of Dr. Tom's in Palm Desert.
Oh, I think, I don't know who's
Just
talking
scheduled
right
an
now, but whoever it
appointment
is,
with
I
you
can hear
guys,
your phone call.
for an exam. I've got a really bad tooth, and they recommended me.
Someone has a tooth problem. I'm sorry to hear that. Okay.
Endodontist, I think.
Deanna, I can't see who's talking. So yeah, if
I
you're,
just muted.
oh, okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I really appreciate that. We'll have to follow up with whoever that was and make sure they're okay. Tooth problems are not fun. So uncomfortable is normal. Stick to the vision. And I'm not talking about like corporate vision. I'm talking about what is it that you're really trying to accomplish in your work. Say it's like a ticket. So the vision of a ticket is we want this to be the indication that this work is done. It's very easy to go off on rabbit trails, but if you stick to that vision, it's going to be a lot more, going to be a lot easier for us to complete work if we all have that end goal in mind. So that might seem a little bit counterintuitive because I just said, learn to operate in the gray, and things are predictable and uncomfortable as a rule. But it doesn't mean that we still can't make sure that we're trying our hardest to make sure that we're staying on track with what it is that we want to do. And the other thing that we can do is make sure that as leaders, we're logging all the questions and concerns that come up throughout the process of solving a problem. The idea is that we want to learn and how to respond better the next time. And so if someone has a comment or a question in the midst of solving a problem, you can just make a note of that and go, hey, that was a really good question. Next time this happens, we're going to anticipate that coming again, and we're going to have some solutions in place already. And then related to the last point, know what you're going to do next. As leaders, we're in the game of trying to predict the future. And so if we can be better at anticipating problems before they happen, we're going to set our team up and ourselves up a lot better to be successful. The third thing is know how many plates you can spin at one time. Daniel made the reference to juggling balls, but this is the same thing. And Daniel talked about, and he made a great point, the importance of self-awareness here is there are times when I'm less self-aware than I should be because I think that I can do a lot. I think I'm pretty talented. I think I'm a pretty hard worker. And so someone comes to me and says, hey, Steve, we need you to do this. What do you think? And I'm attracted to that idea that Daniel shared earlier about, wow, this is gonna give me an opportunity to show my value. And plus, I think I can enjoy the things that are given to me, and I get a lot of value and sense of self out of that. And so I tend to say yes. But we need to know I need to know how many plates I can actually spin at one time, because if I have too many on the go and one of them falls, or two of them, or even if none of the plates fall, but they're not spinning very well. In other words, I can do a lot of work, but it's going to be shoddy work, or I'm going to burn out. So I have to know those limits, and I have to know those boundaries in myself. And I also have to, and I encourage us all to know what that limit is for us so that we can actually get to the point where we're saying no to something. And even if it might be hard for us to say no, like for those of us who are on the call that report to someone, I get it. It's really hard to go to your supervisor and say no when they tell you to do something. And so if that's not an easy place for you to get to, I encourage you to maybe have a conversation that might go something like this. When someone says, I need you to add this to your list, they say, okay, well, you know what, that sounds great. I think I can do that for sure. But here are all the other things I have going on. Is there anything that you think I can maybe take off my existing list so I can add this? Or let's talk about a realistic deadline for what you've just given me. I'm thinking 3 months is going to be good based on all the other stuff I have going on. And what you just heard me say, that example, is an example of a conversation as opposed to a transaction. And so if you can demonstrate that, if you can model that behavior in yourself, and then give your team members just the space to be able to approach you in that way, that's going to make a huge difference in the lives of your team members. So here's some solutions that I can offer you. Choose wisely. We can't do it all. We would like to, and we can probably say, yeah, there's so many valuable things that we could be doing or should be doing. But we're finite beings. We have a limit. We can't do it all. And so we have to really know who we are. We have to know ourselves well enough that we're not taking on things that take us out of being in our sweet spot. Now, does that mean that we say no anytime there's something that comes across our plate that we just don't want to do? I'm not talking about, oh, I don't feel like it, therefore I don't want to do it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is, am I going to be able to thrive if I add this other plate to the other ones that are already spinning? And then just having a good conversation about it to make sure that everyone is on the same page. I think we need to, in leadership and in IT especially, we need to do a better job of thinking about outsourcing some stuff. If you're like us, we think we've got a really talented team and there's a challenge. And so we think, oh yeah, we've got the bandwidth, we can do that internally. Because we think for some reason that it's going to be a great experience. It's fun to solve problems and be creative. We're going to save a lot of money. But we need to really think about outsourcing if we can. So we have, most of us use a lot of vendors. They have support. We maybe need to use them more. Maybe there's some marketing stuff that we could outsource a little bit more. Or if there's like a project management tool that's out there, TopLeft, that yeah, shameless plug, Jim. If we can use other tools so that we can kind of take the burden off of our own selves and our teams, we should consider doing that more. Batching is probably something that we're all familiar with. Maybe there are better ways to be efficient with the work that we have in front of us. And so if we have 10 things that are on our plate to do, maybe we can group those 10 things into subgroups of 3 or 4 if there's some similarities in the work, so that we can share resources across tasks and those types of things. So it takes a little bit of planning, but batching is definitely something that can help us as we're spinning all of our plates. Okay, I believe we are on track. We're almost at the end here. We've got 3 more things to share, but we're doing fine, folks. I just want to take a little bit of a breath and give you guys a chance to kind of take a mental breath. Are we on track? I know I'm kind of racing through here, but are we on track? If you have any questions, put them in the chat. And at the end, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to address those. But yeah, any questions, throw them in the chat. But I'm going to keep racing ahead here to make sure that we get to the end. Okay. The 4th thing, identify and pursue problems. Don't wait for them to come to you. Daniel shared a little bit about this just in terms of his own approach. And I certainly resonate with what he said related to this, but I also mentioned earlier that typically we are problem solvers in our nature. Sometimes what we do is we make the mistake of creating problems when they don't exist in the first place, just so we can get the hit of trying to solve a problem. So we need to be very careful about that. But what I'm addressing here in point number 4 is a problem like with a client, like something breaks in their environment, or something breaks in your own internal environment, or a ticket doesn't go as you had originally planned. Rather than panic and kind of take a step back and go, oh, you know what, I'm going to just, hopefully this thing goes away, and, or maybe someone else is going to handle that, because that's not really my area. We start to come up with reasons why to kind of avoid. But I want to challenge us all. What does it mean to kind of race into the problem in a very confident and aggressive way in order to start solving the problem? And it's a very different approach. But if we wait for problems to always come to us, that could be a problem. And so we have to anticipate what's going on. So when you're in the position of creating a ticket and assigning it to someone, be asking in the back of your mind, okay, what possibly could go wrong here? And it's not that you share that with people, because you don't want to create any kind of nervousness or anxiety, but you're in the back of your mind going, okay, who's on this ticket? I know the client. We've tried this before. So what possibly could go wrong? And so you're moving ahead with confidence, but you're also just logging some possible solutions to problems that might happen in the course of working on that task. Think about the idea of pain avoidance, because like Daniel said, and like I shared earlier, we all want to protect ourselves. We don't like pain. We don't like conflict. And so we'd rather just kind of stand back and wait and hope that problems go away. So just be aware of the fact that we want to protect ourselves, and that's okay. That's a natural reaction, but know that that could hold you back. So what are some solutions here? Engage in what I'm just calling scenario thinking exercises. And so, like I said earlier, you're constantly in this pattern as a leader, or even if you're not a leader, you're a technician or an engineer, you're constantly going through scenarios like the what if. If this happens, then I'm going to try this. Or if that happens, then I'm going to try this. Or if this happens, I'm going to ask for help sooner than later. So you're constantly going through these scenarios so that when the problem actually comes, which it will, you're not reacting. You've already got a little bit of a plan in mind. Respond in a way that encourages calm engagement. The last thing that we want to do, whether we're in a leadership position or not, if we're constantly flying off the handle whenever something goes wrong and we're reacting or overreacting or blaming, that's not going to create the culture that you want for really good, calm problem solving. So if you're calm when you have a problem that you need to address, then other people are going to respond in kind. If you're not, if you're overreacting and flying off the handle, chances are people around you are going to do the same. And then, like we said before, recognize that problems are just the stuff of life. Problems are not going away. We might think that you know, we're in the business of eliminating problems, but we're not. We're never going to be there. And so, how do we deal? How do we deal? And so, it's just the stuff of life. When problems happen at work, when problems happen at home, wow, okay, this happened. What are we going to do? How are we going to respond? And invite that calm response. Fifth, venture outside your own perspective. One of the things that I really appreciated about, and this is why I wanted Daniel to share, is he brought his own perspective, and what he encouraged us to think about is the fact that we bring ourselves to a situation. If I would have asked any one of you on this call to share for a short or brief time, you would have brought your own unique story. But the reason now, hopefully even though you might not know Daniel, and maybe some of you might never interact with him again, hopefully what you have is a little bit deeper insight into who Daniel is, so that you go, okay, yeah, you know what? That's cool. Now I know how he's going to approach problems or approach work or interact with people. It's neither right nor wrong, good nor bad. It is what it is. And we each have our own story. And so from the idea, what we said earlier about self-awareness, we have to know what is kind of built into our DNA when it comes to how we're doing our work and how we're approaching problems. Here's a bit of a, I'm going to say it's a bit of a bombastic statement. It's not meant to be negative, but I think it's true. We have to get more comfortable with the fact that people don't care about what you think or who you are. And just to word it another way, people don't care about what I think or who I am. And the reason that I say it that way is going back to the fact that we try, when we're solving problems or when we're experiencing difficulty, we tend to get really self-centered. And that's what I mean. I care about each person on our team. I care about who they are and what they think, but I have to constantly remind myself of that when I get into problem solving mode. And so when I know that each person brings his or her own perspective to a problem, that allows me to tap into that to really start a good conversation about how we get to the solution. What are a couple of things here that we can do to make this a little bit more implementable? If we're in positions of leadership or not, it is in our best interest to get to know our people and their stories. Now, I give it to Daniel. Daniel was very vulnerable and authentic, and you can choose to what depth you want to go and how real and open you want to be with your team. But the idea is that we cannot forget that each person brings their own unique story and perspective. And so if we don't know what that is, how can we properly engage in good conversation when we're problem solving together as a team? And so whether you want to just do that in conversation over a coffee or in a meeting, a group meeting where you go around the table, but find some way to get to know your people and their stories, and then ask questions of yourself and of others. And so here's what I mean by that. If you can tell, by the way, that my cadence has kind of picked up, I've got one eye on the clock here, and I want to make sure that we're finishing on time. So I've rammed it down a gear, and I'm punching up the RPMs here. So one of the things that I know, part of my story is I constantly battle with myself when something goes wrong. I think it's probably my fault. And so that produces a reaction in me that leads to other kind of difficulties. So I take on too much, or I take on a lot of guilt, and that adds to other negative consequences. And so I have to ask myself questions all the time. And one of the questions I ask is, man, why does that make me feel that way? Or why do I constantly go to that place of guilt? And by just asking myself that question, it automatically resets how I respond to that problem, because I don't usually have a good answer. And so that's an example of how I ask myself questions, and maybe you can use that in your own life as well. And then proactively manage expectations. This goes to what we were saying before of the idea of, if we can anticipate problems before we said that, but also imagine how powerful we could be in anticipating problems if we also knew who our people are, so that we can go, okay. And Daniel, I'm using you as an example just because you shared with us, but if I know Daniel really well and I know his story, then when a problem happens and Daniel responds in a certain way, I'm not at all freaked out or threatened by that, because I know Daniel's story. And so I can just calmly go, yeah, that makes sense, how he's responding. But then I can enter into a conversation as opposed to just doing some reacting on my own, which is unhealthy. Okay, last one, gang. Embrace calculated risk. Usually, and I'm generalizing here, but usually when a problem occurs, we tend to paralyze. We tend to paralyze and just have that moment of deer in the headlights where we're going, oh crap, what do I do now? And we can use the psychological terms of like fight or flight or whatever they call it now, but there is that moment where we paralyze while we're determining what it is that we want to do. I think we should avoid that. Now, we have to be smart and calculated, but this is what I'm talking about. And if we're constantly engaging in those what if scenarios like I talked about earlier, we're going to practice taking small risk to focus on the wins. Maybe there are things that we can do with our teams that go, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be, so I can't control that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just let people just do what they do. And if something goes wrong, that's okay, because I've anticipated that if something goes wrong, it's not going to affect too much and we can probably recover. If you can show the team that you're willing to just kind of let them go and take a few chances and stumble a little bit, that's going to create a culture that you want in terms of people feeling the freedom to take a risk here and there. Measure the gain and not the gap. Typically what we do when problems happen is we start asking questions like, oh, what went wrong? Or who didn't do this? Or what's faulty in the process? And why didn't this happen? You know, we typically go there. So that's the gap. Focusing on measuring the gain is what is, for example, asking questions like, hey, okay, what can we do differently next time? Or where didn't I communicate well? Or what's going on in the client's life that maybe contributed to this problem, because they bring their own perspective as well. So that's the difference between measuring the gain and the gap. And then failure is something to be learned from, not feared. If we can create cultures where failure is just another way to get to the answer to the problem or the solution to the problem, pretty soon you're going to have people coming and not feeling paralyzed or not resorting to kind of closing in on themselves, but you're going to get people having conversations, and you're going to have people who are not afraid to ask for help because they know that they're not going to be rejected for doing that, but it's going to be welcomed, and those types of things going forward. So we've got 2 more minutes left based on my clock. I'm not going to go line by line here, but this is just kind of a summary, because you should get these the slide deck emailed to you. And so this is just a kind of a cheat sheet to talk about, to summarize what we talked about today. So that's it, gang. I had a 4th thing, and that was, I'm gonna skip that because I respect your time and I don't want to keep you any longer. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just encourage you all, if this has resonated with you in any way, feel free to shoot me an email if you have some questions or comments, or you're concerned about some of the things that you've heard. We want to be a resource to you. And so please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to jump on a call and maybe dig into this a little bit deeper and maybe close some of the loops that might seem open. But other than that, I just really appreciate each one of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk about what I think is a really important thing that holds a lot of us back. And so thank you. Daniel, thank you for sharing a little bit of your story. Deanna, as always, thank you for being behind the scenes and making sure that we're all connected. And I wish everyone a great rest of the week and hope to see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.